morning, guys. So we need to go with our topic for today. Today's SME check-in, we are discussing resilience in your business. And I think it's quite a relevant topic because I think most of us have probably gone through a stage of experiencing a little bit of a downturn in our companies. We've probably gone through a bit of a stressful situation where we've had to relook at how we're operating, how we're doing business, and how business will survive in this new era or this new paradigm shift of business within the lockdown criteria and how our economy is currently sitting. So we thought it was quite a nice, relevant discussion, and we've also had this similar topic in our group masterminds, which brought about quite a bit of debate and discussions around the need for resilience, but also the need for the factors that we talk about within this topic as well. So as a quick introduction, the reason and the way this whole thing started was as the pandemic hit us and as we went into lockdown, we decided that as a business owner, we tend to isolate ourselves quite quickly, and we tend to hold back on communication and discussions around what's going on in our worlds of business, but also potentially our personal lives. We tend to not want to share things, especially when they are tough, and we tend to want to look at how we can do things by ourselves and work things on our own. And we thought this would be a nice space to connect with other business owners and discuss how your business is going, share some relevant business news, and also help businesses just understand where to next from here. And as the lockdown progressed, we realized that the need for information and the need around how to kickstart or to rework your business became more critical, but also the fact that the lockdown regulations came with a lot of unknowns and uncertainty. And it was a good way of sharing this information with a community of business owners and also understanding what they're going through. And in that way, understanding that you aren't alone in this sort of pandemic, and understanding that you aren't the only one going through what you're going through. And that slowly merged and evolved into what we now have as an SME check-in, where we do something very similar, but now we just try and share more information and get a bit of a hub of business owners together and chatting about what they're experiencing and how we can improve their businesses. So I want to ask that I've unmuted, or sorry, I haven't unmuted. I've allowed you all to participate and talk. So if I can ask to just mute yourselves while we are presenting, and if you want to jump in and ask questions and give your views, you're more than welcome to during the presentation. If anything, it'll help me present because I'll be able to answer questions more smoothly and make sure we drive this topic towards something that you guys can get benefit out of as well. So if you want to stop, if you want to ask questions, you can either raise your hand, you can write in the comments, or you can just pop up and chat. I'm more than happy with that. All right. We've shared this slide quite a bit, so I'm not going to run through it in too much detail because I think we're all aware of the current economic state we're in. At this point, the South African economy versus the global economy are pretty much in dire straits. For those of you who don't know yet, our Q2 GDP results, our gross domestic product results, were released about a week or two ago. And as compared to last year, our economy pretty much shrank by 50%, 51%. Which is a huge knock to the spending capacity. It's a huge knock to businesses. It also means that, unfortunately, if there are no businesses and there's no money going around, that the potential for job loss and the need and the power of spending has been taken away from the consumer as well. So we are currently in quite a particular or peculiar state. This is the first time as a country we've experienced the new democratic era. And not to mention that the amount of corruption and other issues we picked up with regards to this pandemic as well. So business isn't easy, in other words. The biggest struggle we have right now is trying to figure out what comes next, trying to get some certainty in uncertain times, and how do we build our businesses to be resilient to factors that we can't control. So things like economic policies, things like lockdown regulations. Ramaphosa mentioned last night that we're moving to lockdown level 1. Which is a slight easing of requirements and fortunately opening up of our borders again, which hopefully means that things like tourism and our restaurants and our entertainment industries can start opening up and contributing back to our GDP and our national economy. So, from a confidence level, our business confidence is really low. If anything, I can't see that going up too quickly, other than either stabilizing or maybe even decreasing, because I think a lot of business owners will still feel the effect of what's happened with regards to the pandemics and the shutdowns of our economies, probably into the next 6 months to a year still. So we are still quite a long way of turning around and getting back to where we were. And if we ever do get back to where we were, I don't think the business environment will be similar to what it was pre-lockdown era. I think we've all been forced to adapt. We've all been forced to rethink of our models, and I think that's how we move forward now is going to be vitally important.
Damion, I just want to mention, morning everybody. I just want to add to your comments here quickly. So we also need to realize we're not alone. We actually be subjected to global pressures, global experiences, and many millions of business owners are all going through similar experiences. And if you just look at the news, I watched CNN last night, the way the Americans are handling the COVID pandemic compared to South Africa. You know, it's a vast difference between the two countries in from a governance point of view, from government getting involved, and even with the second waves hitting the UK, France, and other countries now, you know, this thing is not over, but it's going beyond just the actual COVID threat. It's actually the impact on people's lives, and the livelihoods. You know, the mentalities, the way they feel about themselves, the confidence levels in business. So it's a global thing that we're all involved with. Just a little bit of point there.
Thank you. So, so one thing we have to understand is that there is also this thing called a measurability index or misery index, and South Africa as a country right now is sitting at the a third from the bottom. So we are considered one of the most miserable economies in the world right now. Hopefully, and like Hank mentioned, we won't be hit with a huge second wave. And hopefully that index will improve, and I'm sure it will. There's a good chance, I think we find out today whether or not the repo rate will be changed or reduced again, which hopefully will spur on some more investment and more spending from our consumers as well, and hopefully therefore help businesses again. But we are in a state where we need to start looking forward and start understanding how we can start building our businesses again. And like Hank mentioned, there's also that unfortunate thing of we all do take our businesses very personally, and we do put a lot of pressure on ourselves and stress on ourselves to keep our businesses going. So hopefully with an increase in some business, hopefully with a restructuring of what we can do today, there may be a bit of a lift in our personal environments and the stress levels we go through as well. All right. Before we really can dive into what our businesses are about, we have to understand that we've got to look at where our businesses currently fall in and what our businesses are currently looking like. So we have to think about what stage is our business currently in. So if we look at let me just go back to 2 slides. If we look at what stage our company is currently in, are we currently at the survival point? Is it all about making the money right now? Are we struggling to sell? Are we fighting for cash flow? Or are we moving to a stage where our business can operate smoothly enough and provide enough money for us or enough support for us to support the lifestyles of us as business owners? If we're at that stage and we're comfortable, are we able to start looking at how can we scale? And scaling is a difficult term to comprehend sometimes because it's used so widely. But an easy way to understand scaling is to think, can I multiply my business by 3, by 4, by 5, by 10? So how rapidly can I grow my company? And if I can't grow my company very rapidly, the chances are I'm not ready for scaling it. And that literally means that I can take my business from the point it's at right now, times it by 5, times it by 10, and easily adapt to the needs and the requirements or the demands of that sort of size. The last point, and once I'm able to start scaling, is am I able to look at my business as a sellable entity? Now, generally, we don't think about selling our companies. Generally, as business owners, we think we are in our business for life, and our business will just wither away and support us until we choose to exit the company. The reason why we talk about sellability again, and just a reminder to everyone, is that we want to give ourselves options of what can happen if something comes along. And those options is essentially what we term being free of your business. And what that means is I have the option to choose where to next for myself. And with that option to choose, I can quickly adapt and quickly change things as I see fit or as I want to. And those options could be something from removing myself from the day-to-day operations as a formal employee of the company and potentially looking at myself as just a shareholder, just a board member, a chairman of the board, or potentially handing it over to the next level of management or even my family or my relatives, and let that business run into perpetuity without me being there, effectively building a legacy. Or if I want to retire and not work and enjoy my retirement, sell off my interest in my business, take the money I've made or the wealth I've created, and enjoy other investments or other ways of spending that wealth and enjoying that wealth. So understanding where we are in our companies right now will also help me determine what efforts I need to put in place at this point to get to the next stage of that company or the next stage of that life cycle. We also have to understand our markets. So do we know why businesses fail? What is currently happening within our market space that may cause our business to take a bit of a knock? A example of that will be the current lockdown situation. How does the relaxation of something like the curfew affect your business? If we aren't operating after hours, then probably it won't affect you, right? If you're in the restaurant, or if you are in the entertainment industry, a curfew right now is detrimental to your business. You can't operate past 11:30 or 11 o'clock due to the fact that your clients have to be back in their houses, back in their homes by 12. So how does the factors affecting lockdown, how do the factors affecting um, the operations of your business currently affect the marketing potential, but also the effect of how you operate as well? And then lastly, what are the key elements in your business that you need to consider to mitigate the risk of not being sellable, or of not being scalable, or of only surviving? And we've got the eight elements that we look at. I'm not going to run through them today, but we have the 8 elements we look at to try and make your business as sellable as possible, and look at your business objectively to try and move you to that point of being sellable, putting a value to your company, understanding what the wealth in your company is for you personally, and how do we give you those options to give yourself more freedom. All right. Okay, before we move on to the topic for today, I just want to remind everyone and those who are new to this forum that we do have a hosted shared drive where we've got countless amounts of information regarding the pandemic, any rules or regulations, any policies that need to be implemented with regards to being ready for business, opening your business. So if you do have any questions, we can share that link with you. You're more than welcome to use the information on hand there. Secondly, we also record these sessions, and these sessions then get uploaded to our YouTube channel. So if you do miss a session, or you want to look at some past videos, you're more than welcome to like or subscribe to our channel and have a look and view these videos. They are quite long, so each video is about an hour long, but we do share a lot of relevant information either on business or on your on the personal side of things, and finding that balance. All right. Okay. Again, guys, just a reminder, if I can ask, please remain muted just so we don't have some background noise. If you want to raise your hands or talk, you're more than welcome to share ideas or have a bit of a debate. All right. Our topic for today is business resilience. And the question is, how do I remove the need or the stress around worrying that my business won't survive something? How do I get to a point where I can look at my business and know that I can use the resources at hand, or I can make the resources at hand work to my advantage? And what are those resources I can look at? How do I look at the factors that could potentially affect my business resilience? Now, as a business owner, generally, like I mentioned, we take our businesses very seriously. We are very emotional about our businesses, and something like business resilience becomes a really big issue when we start seeing a decline, or start relying on something too much. And what that then causes is a huge amount of stress on our personal lives. It means we can't operate effectively because we're either not sleeping, or we feel overwhelmed because we've had to take up some slack that someone's left over, and we tend to bring that home with us. So having a plan in place of building a resilient business tends to also help me sleep better at night. It tends to help us as business owners not stress or fret too much about the business surviving something. And again, as the clearest example, something like a macro factor that we can't control, like a pandemic or lockdowns, it helps me just manage or push through these barriers that come about, because I can move quickly. I can know that by making a few changes, I can work through possible situations, or possible sort of opportunities, and I can make quick moves to keep the business going. So how do we build a resilient business? What do we look at when we want to do or build a resilience plan? So the first question is, what is resilience, right? And effectively, resilience talks to, how do I build a continuity plan? How do I build a business where no matter what happens, or no matter what comes about, my business can continue? Even if that means taking a bit of a knock, it can still operate, or can still recover quickly enough to make sure the business can continue and survive past that point. Now, when you do things like process management, when you talk about things like continuity planning, you identify key risks of the business, and depending on your industry, some of those risks may be more identifiable. So if you're in the IT industry, your IT equipment or your IT infrastructures are the heart and soul of your business. And those sort of continuity plans tend to talk to securing your IT environment to make sure if anything happens, it goes forwards. Now, we can apply the same methodology around a business and around how we want to protect our interests. And the question will be is how do we go about doing that? Which tends to be quite difficult, right? The second part, and like I mentioned, generally with regards to continuity plans, we tend to bring it back onto ourselves as well. If our business can't continue, we take on the personal stress and the personal strain of making that business work then. And that again affects our personal well-being. It affects the balance we're trying to reach in our lives. Most of us tend to start companies for the purpose of having a business that can work for me, right? And work for what I need to achieve in my life. And when that business starts taking a knock, it starts affecting me personally as well. So the question will be is how do I build a company, or how do I build a business or an entity or an asset that can still work for me regardless of what happens in an exterior or with things I can't generally control. So there are some risks to not planning these things. And I know it's probably quite obvious, but again, I think it's good to mention them. The risks of not planning tend to be a reduction in your delivery capacity. So if something happens in your company, am I still able to produce or deliver to the same requirement or to the same standard as I normally would? And the chances are, when we start looking at something happening in our environment, I am not able to deliver more, and therefore I tend to have a bit of an issue with regards to customer buy-in. My standardization tends to drop. I tend to look at things like a financial loss. So because I'm not delivering or because I can't produce, I tend to not make as much money as I used to, and therefore my overheads, which tend to remain quite fixed, or remains quite fixed, and tends to start knocking onto things like profitability, and also starts looking at cash flow. The problem with that then comes in is as I start losing that grounding or that footing, and my profitability starts decreasing, I start having an issue with regards to my recovery. And the longer it takes me to recover, the harder it becomes to recover. So the sooner I can start making profit, the sooner I can get back to capacity, the better for my business longevity. Now, obviously, when we aren't producing, when we start degrading our services or degrading our delivery mechanisms, we start looking at things like reputational damage. So how do I start building a reputation, or how do I avoid that reputational damage as well? And then, of course, the obvious one would be things like your business disruption and the potential business closure, which is the huge concern for most of us. Now, a lot of us, I think, have gone for the route of probably being in a business that was quite good for our lifestyle. It could support the way we were doing things. It supported how we operated in our personal capacities. And because of the COVID pandemic and the way we're currently doing business, we've had to shift back a level or shift back a stage of where our business was. So for most of us, and I think for most of the economy, we're probably being put back into either a lifestyle phase again, so we aren't able to scale right now, or if we were in a lifestyle phase, being moved back into that survival phase. So how do we start planning, or how to start getting out of the stages and moving back to where we were pre-lockdown?
Yeah, Damien, maybe just to mention as well, it's quite interesting to look at our customers and look at a profile shift, probably about January, February 2020 to where we are today, going into October 2020. How the stress levels have risen for the business ownership, and if you look at the confidence levels have gone down, people are not buying. So you may not have lost customers potentially, but you definitely would have lost some income. So people are scared to spend money. They're holding back on, even if they do owe you money. Sometimes people, or quite often we find that people are not paying their accounts. And these things, of course, have got a ripple effect on us as the personal ownership. So that risk of planning is not just during a pandemic. It's actually looking forward now. Where are we going into the new financial year? 2021 is around the corner. And how can to improve the situation.
Awesome. So I think Hank mentions the point there. One of the big things about planning is that you are planning for something that might happen, not necessarily planning for something that has happened already. So it's a long-term view. It's something we have to consider implementing for a potential to come about. It's almost like that really annoying thing of paying for insurance or paying for medical aid. We pay for something that might happen so that when it happens, we are in a better position and we aren't hit financially or hit with a bill that comes our way unexpectedly. So the benefits of planning generally look at something that's a long-term focus and not as something that's happened already. So as an example, if we only start planning now for the pandemic, I mean, obviously it's far too late already. So again, in the converse of not planning, or at the risk of not planning, the benefits of planning look at something like reducing the impact of production. So if I'm able to move my resources around to make sure that whatever happens, I can still produce, the chances are things like my profitability, things like the rate of recovery are increased far faster and made far more effective due to the fact that I've got this plan in place to continue producing. There's also an opportunity with regards to looking at things like succession planning and looking at continuities, because if people start leaving my company, there's a good opportunity to bring in new talent and new expertise and try and push the business forward as well. There's a very nice phrase: the only constant in business is change. And with those changes, we tend to see better results and new efficiencies coming through as well. And then, of course, the obvious things like, continuation of business, the increased potential of new business and growth in your business, and potentially also reinvigoration of your business culture. So what tends to happen is, without any problems in our business, or without our business going through any changes, we tend to lose some of the values we've brought about as business owners. We tend to forget about why we started our business and the purpose of our business, and we tend to lose that culture somewhat. So when we start planning and pushing forward a plan of removing the reliance of a particular factor, or looking at the resilience of our business, we start to see what our purpose was, and we start to push out any of the bad habits we formed and rebuild that business culture and reinvigorate that business culture again. All right. We're going to move on to what the three main factors are for continuity and for building business resilience. And I think most of us will probably feel this. I think most of us have gone through at least one or two of these aspects as the pandemic hit us. So the three critical areas to consider when looking at resilience is: how reliant am I on my employees, how reliant am I on my customers, and how reliant am I on my suppliers? And if you think about any one of these factors, if I'm overly reliant on either one of these three areas, overly reliant on an employee, overly reliant on one big customer, or overly reliant on one key supplier, the chances of how that person or that entity can affect my business is huge. The more I can spread that risk, the more I can mitigate the risk of being over-reliant, the better my business will adapt. So if you think of something like the pandemic, which is again the nice easy example, if I was over-reliant on one key employee, and that employee cost me a huge amount of money, and the business took a bit of a knock financially with regards to revenue, and I can no longer afford to keep that employee, and that employee can move on to the next business or find a better salary structure that I can afford, the chances are my business will take a huge knock to keep operating with somebody who had so much insight into how the business operates. The same will go for a customer. If I had one big customer and that customer brought in 50% of my revenue, and because of the pandemic and because of the way his business was operated, their business was operated, that customer lost revenue and had to shut their doors, what does it mean for my business? Now, with the reduction in revenue on my side, and again, my fixed cost standing still, how do I start making profit now? Where do I look to make more money? Where do I look to bring in more income to make sure I can still hold up or pay my overheads? And then last thing we look at suppliers is: how do I mitigate the risk of my suppliers holding me hostage to either payment terms, to price increases, or to just going out of business? If I'm extremely reliant on one supplier producing something or servicing something on my part, how does that affect the productivity of my business or the standardization of my business? And am I too reliant on either one of those three areas? If anyone's willing to have a chat or talk now, I'd like to ask a question and just see who has felt a over-reliance during this period now on one of those three factors. Anybody want to share a little bit of a story or a discussion? You're welcome to unmute yourselves.
Yeah, Damion, like I mentioned, maybe we didn't even lose a customer or particular key customer. Maybe they just stopped buying from us, so they may only start buying from us now again or in a coming financial period. But still, the same principle applies. If we lose that revenue from a particular customer, it may hurt us. So if you just look at OptiGrowth, we have not really lost customers as such, but definitely people have stopped for a period, at least 3 months or so, stop buying from us. And we had to also find ourselves in evaluating the risk to our business, so we all go through the same things. It'd be interesting to hear somebody else perhaps that also had some of the similar experiences or something to that extent.
Sounds like we have a very quiet audience today.
Damion, if I can come in here, because if I look at, obviously, we've had a few examples of our own customers where, because of COVID, they've realized that they've actually had too many employees in the business that haven't actually been pulling their weight. So I don't think it's so much a reliance on the employees, but I think it has actually made us very aware of the fact that in some we just three in the business, but a lot of us that they actually can fine tune their business in such a way that they don't have to have all these expenses. And obviously we're speaking about one of our customers who's actually managed to save quite a substantial amount of money because they've realized that they didn't need all their staff that they had.
Awesome. I see Michelle, your hand's raised.
I'm Michelle Robertson Swift, Urbanscapes Landscape Architects. One of our streams of customers has been government for quite a few years, local, national, and provincial. And of course, with COVID and before that, a drought and so on, we've had redirection of funds from spatial planning and design and development to these crises. With the President's address last night, it was very interesting to actually hear that there might be a redirection back to some sort of spatial planning and design in terms of social, issues, for example, children looking at how we can that. So I think the one issue is that in terms of customers, if we find a redirection of their funds or redirection of our customers, we actually have to in this time be more creative and try and see in terms of our business what we can actually bring to the table and get our customers back in certain streams.
Sorry, 100%. Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate the sharing. So I want to move on to the first factor and just give you guys a few ideas of how we can start building that lack of reliance or that lack of need of reliance on particularly the first three factors. So the first one to look at is our employee structure and how we look at our employees. So we actually had quite a good debate the other day with somebody who was very much against the fact that we need employees in our businesses. That is a new way of looking at how we operate and how we bring about our business, that the need for employees might not be as relevant as it previously was. So, I mean, whether that's true or not, whether we can debate that point more. The fact is most of us will have employees. The fact is most of what we will be doing in our company is dealing with people and dealing with people who need to do work. And unfortunately, our restrictions with regards to employment and labor law also results in the fact that we have to be very aware of the fact that our employees are a critical part of our business and need to be looked after. So one way of reducing over-reliance on employees is looking at your employee retention strategies. So how do we make the people or the staff who are important to us or the staff we want to keep, how do we make them feel like they want to stay? How do we incentivize them to stick with the business and remain with the business? And there are a few strategies we can use to do that, things like share incentives. So offering them a stake in the business if they stay for a particular period of time. This is generally quite a sensitive topic because no business owner ever wants to give wealth away or give their shares away. But it is a nice mechanism. Sorry, someone want to say something? Okay. Share incentives is a nice mechanism of putting a value to what they've done for you or putting a value to their service and offering them a way of keeping that value and seeing some reward for their stays. There are things like stay bonuses. So after a certain period of time, we can look at giving them a nice big check to say thank you for your services. We can give them additional leave days. We can look at things like training. But again, there are a lot of strategies we can use to try and keep our staff. The question will be are we keeping those staff for the right reasons? So are they vital to the business because we are over-reliant on that particular person? Or are they vital to the business because they are doing good work for us? And I think that understanding or that differentiation is vitally important to keeping your business alive and making sure that you don't have this knee-jerk reaction to trying to replace somebody who's taken up too much of the workforce, or has become the expert of your business and not an expert of their particular trade. So that little differentiation is key to understand as well. The next one is looking at defining processes and policies. So how do I take my business and how do I create what we call a recipe? I know it's very cheesy, but create a recipe for the various business functions or positions in my company. So by that, I mean, what can I do to make my employees really understand what they've got to do and to standardize how they produce their work? And by standardizing or creating that recipe, I'm able to then ensure that something like the standardization of the results are consistent. I'm able to produce more efficiencies and make more profits because I'm taking out a few steps or things that need to be done. I'm also at that point alleviating the risk of people thinking too much. And as terrible as it sounds, I don't want my staff being creative about how my business should run. So what I want to do is to make sure I give the guidance and the definition of what they should be doing and able to work at the best of their abilities to get things done properly. The flip side of a policy and procedure documents is that I can then also look at how do I train my staff to come into work and to do what they've got to do and to get the best results of them. That becomes a very nice training mechanism. So if a staff member with that particular expertise or that function leaves my company for whatever reason, I'm able to put someone back into that space, teach them and get them trained up quite quickly and move them forward into my operational cycle far faster because I've got a way for them to work. They can literally read a document or they can follow a few steps and they can get the work done quickly. So defining a policy or defining a process on how to operate also allows me to quickly change staff if I need to. And there was a very nice discussion we had the other day with one of our clients, is that they literally referred it to my business as a box. And in that box, I've got all these components that need to work together and work together and produce what we do. And the nice thing about what they've started doing now and the benefits of seeing a process being defined is they can remove parts of that machine and they can buy or get in a similar part, put it in place and know how the wheel operates or know how they deliver again. So the chances of them ever relying too heavily on one person is now starting to be mitigated because they can quickly find somebody to replace them because they're coming into an operation that is very well spec'd out and defined. The last point on processes and policies.
So people often these are really for corporate business. I mean, why must I now sit and worry about processes and policies and all kinds of things? But it's from our experience, and if it stepping out of the business a bit, put an organogram together to start off with. Look at your company structure, what job ranks do you really need to fill in the business, and ultimately what resources do you need to apply to that. So it's not just employees in that case; it could also be outsourcing people. So it need to be a fit for purpose process or policy that you put in place. It doesn't have to be a corporate thing. It doesn't have to be long-winded, and on top of it, it doesn't have to be expensive. It's a modern era, modern tools available. We can learn from each other. No reason why we can't copy competitors and people that are going through the same processes or same challenges as us, and learn from other people. So just on that point, it doesn't have to be corporate.
So Henk mentions the fact that you can bring tools about as well. One thing a policy does or a process does for you is it also speeds up that automation process. So we know the scary thing is that with processes generally comes bureaucracy, comes red tape, comes all those things. But again, in a small business environment, you can fit or you can mold that need to what you want right now. It doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be long-winded. It can literally be a short document just to explain what that role does and how that role operates. Because by doing that, when I start automating and when I start removing even more reliance on people to be part of my business and letting tools do the work, I'm able to address where that tool fits into my company. Now, very often when we buy tools, we buy a tool and that tool starts dictating how we operate, which is the wrong way around. We as a business should dictate how we operate and find the tool that fits that structure. And defining a process or a policy helps me just define that and helps me move that forward as well. The last focus area that we can focus on with our employees is what we call performance management. So how do we take our current staffing component and employees in our company And how do I make sure that those employees are constantly engaged and constantly working with the company, and to make sure that I know where their minds are at. And that's a process of performance management. It's all about assessing my employees for what they're doing right now, setting KPIs and metrics that I can measure with them consistently, and having those critical discussions with them about where they see themselves going and how I, as business owner or the manager, see them fitting in that business. Now, those discussions tend to be quite nerve-wracking. We tend to be quite worried about what we're going to say to them. But if the purpose of the discussion is to guide your staff member or to guide your employees into how they can better perform, how they can grow their career within the companies, and even better, if they can't grow in the company, to help direct them to the next stage of the career, you are able to then plan for when that employee leaves, how to replace them and how to succeed that person in that position. So performance management takes the role of having discussions and starting to talk to employees about where they see themselves going to next. Is there space in the business for them if they want to grow, if they want more money, if they want to educate more or learn more? How do we get to the point where we can understand what they're doing and where that fits into the business life cycle, but also where that fits into their personal life cycles? Helen, I see you raised your hand. Helen, you there?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
I almost left the meeting thinking that I'm unmuting myself. Hi, everyone. I had a question, or at least a comment and a question. So one of the things that I'm having to really think quite deeply on is, you know, the permanency of certain staff members. So doing almost like a review of what is necessary now, what do I anticipate for the future going forward, with obviously the growth and expansion that we hopefully can get started up again once things get up and running. But then I wonder, okay, in terms of those services, or employees and the work that they do, can we outsource? So like, for example, a gardener and caretaker, and evaluating whether or not you need someone in that capacity full time. But then I wonder, how does one manage then the performance to serve and something be in a matter of discussing with the agency directly, because obviously the person that they would send to do a specific task or job, for example, in a gardener, for example, or someone that just does general cleaning maybe once or twice a week. Will that discussion then have to be done with the agency in terms of their performance? I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. So the short answer would be is that as part of your defining of the process of that particular position, you'll start identifying the key deliverables that position needs to bring about. So those key deliverables will then have to be shared with the agency you want to appoint to bring the contractor, to bring the support person to your business. So by defining the key deliverables, we can then start measuring the need for that firstly, but secondly, also the type of people we want to employ as well, or the type of contractor we want to get on board. So defining a description of what that person does, defining how that person operates, allows me to more clearly advise anybody who's going to be helping me to fill that position. Secondly, if I'm going to be not looking at an agency, but looking at appointing somebody, I've also got to make sure that person understands, if it's just a contractor position, for what periods of time they're working as well. So to make sure that they can get the best result for the time they're spending and also have the consistent results going forward.
Damion, there's also a lot to be said for company culture. So more often than not, us as business owners dictate the culture in our business. We often talk about the why to business. Why are we actually doing what we're doing? And quite often, but they originally had a passion to start something. And you mentioned earlier on, people fall in a comfort zone. They sort of like forget the reason why they started a business. And it's important that we actually, Helen, also talk to our, not just the employees, but of course also to outsource agencies, suppliers, contractors, that we share with them what are our values and how they're fitting in with that we measure them according to our business culture, our values to the business, because in the end, they will reflect to our customer base a service level or a service result that will that may have impact on our professional assessment with the customer. In other words, with our performance, with our reputation. So our people, our resources working for us have to also fit in with the culture of our business, and ultimately, of course, the key performance indicators. That deliverables and that we can measure them against. But culture is also an important aspect.
Yeah, the culture aspect is definitely big. And whatever I'm getting the sense that whatever culture we did have previously, obviously being as a result down and so it's almost like having to start from scratch to rebuild and rethink that culture. And but then again, I think a lot of times, because we in survival mode as business owners, I guess we tend to forget also the importance of getting those key employees, once we've obviously identified them, to participate in formulating that culture as well. So know what the objective is, what the roles and systems and procedures are obviously very important. But once we're clear as to what the objective of each role is, in order for it to be a pleasurable and productive environment, we also need to also end in crafting, molding culture, because ultimately they work directly with the clientele or the customer, so
Yeah,
that
that's an
they
excellent
are
point.
clear about what, how to project that as well. Yeah.
No, absolutely. So I mean, that's a very good point and something to really think about. The culture of business before the pandemic. If you think in 2019 what business culture was that you're dealing with your own business, and where you are today, how you have to realign yourself with a new norm. How we
Yeah.
engage today on Zoom, as an example. We don't have face-to-face meetings, so the trust level that you have with a person on the other side, the
Yeah.
way you have to develop that trust now is a completely different approach. So you have to adapt to this, and like we said, ultimately your employees and people have to align with what your passion is, what your business you plan. But thank you. That's good stuff.
Right, we have to move on, guys. It's getting a bit late. So the next factor to consider is how do we build resilience from our customers? So we all understand the fact that if we don't sell, we will die, and that any bit of money right now is a survival mechanism, particularly for businesses who are currently in a survival state. Getting money from your customers is vitally important to your survival. The question will be is how do I mitigate the risk of being over-reliant on one customer? So like we mentioned at the beginning, the big problem with regards to your customers is when I start looking at having one big customer. So in Michelle's case, being government as my biggest supplier, when those fundings start to dry up, when the customer decides to move in a different direction, or when they even find a substitute for your business, the chances are the knock-on effects to your business will be huge. So being over-reliant on one single customer is a huge risk with regards to, again, looking at my overheads and how can I afford my business if that customer does leave me. So the big question will be is how do I grow my customer mix? How do I move forward from being over-reliant on the one customer and being more reliant on multiple customers? So growing that mix and growing this and shrinking that percentage of being over-reliant. And it's a bit counterintuitive. The first thing we could try and do is to obviously get more business. So go out and hunt down more customers, right? Go and find more people who I can sell to. The second thing will be to start reducing the customization or start reducing the amount of work.
Hi, everyone. We seem to have lost Damion there. We just wait for him to reconnect. Just please give us a few seconds.
All right, I think I'm back again, guys. Sorry, my internet seems to be a little bit unstable at the moment. The new normal of doing business, apparently. Can anyone hear me again? Hank?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Damion.
So I don't know where I dropped off, but I'll just quickly give that brief again. What we're going to try and do when we try and spread the risk of having customers or having one big customer is we can either go and look at trying to find more customers, right, and reducing the reliance or the percentage of that total customer. So instead of having 5 customers, having 10, having 15, and hopefully that big spend starts reducing. The second thing is we must start focusing again on what our key purpose is. So start removing some services from that customer. Now, that sounds counterintuitive, because why would I give away money, or why would I stop getting money from a customer? But the reason for that discussion, or that thought process, is that one of the things that happens when we start off is we start promising our customers the world, and we start losing focus on what the purpose of our business was, what the reason for our starting was. And we start customizing our offer to suit the customer's needs. And that tends to happen particularly when our customers start building a massive trust relationship with us. They start trusting the way we do things. They start liking the person we are. They start forming a bit more of a personal relationship, and they start asking questions like, do you think you can do this for me? Do you think you can help me with this area? Or do you think you can build something for me like this? And while also at the time, it tends to also start making us not do what we're good at and not do what we're great at, and start doing things we are only good at. And the risk with that is that we then start becoming a jack of all trades and a master of none. And we also start becoming more substitutable within our environment as well. So as we start growing, and as we start getting more customers on board, and as we start focusing on delivering just what our purpose is and what our core structures are, we can slowly start removing some of those add-on services to our customer and really start delivering the core service we used to do, and therefore mitigating and bringing down that huge spend, or that huge ratio of spend from the one customer. Now, again, this is not something you do overnight. You don't just phone a customer up and say to them, look, I'm going to cut all these services that I've been doing for you because it's not my purpose. The point here is, as we start growing and as we start getting more customers, I can start diluting or start moving off some of the things I'm not good at, or some of the things that aren't part of my core services. So again, a little bit counterintuitive, but again, the two options are, we either look at growing our customer base, we look at focusing on what we do and what our purpose is. And then if we are doing a lot of work for that customer who is quite big, we start reducing those little extras we were doing for them previously and focusing more on our core services again. All right.
So maybe just to mention, I know we're running out of time, but this is quite a good point. If you consider the way business had to adapt in the last few months, and people the customer lights on just to and I think one have to have a bit of sympathy for the changing climate, the economy that we're in. So it's a call is to actually talk to a customer and to say no. It's a very tough call, and it'll be quite interesting to see how it's going to develop into the new norm now in dealing with customers, because customers more and more, if I just look at myself, if I buy from a supplier, are demanding I am now, not just cutting price, but I want more bang for my buck, so interesting topic.
All right, thanks, Hank. So moving on, because we are running out of time, the last factor to consider is looking at suppliers. And how do we remove ourselves from being over-reliant on one particular supplier? And like we mentioned, the biggest risk with suppliers is that they can start dictating or start pushing their own agendas onto my business. So being over-reliant and not having a contingency plan to try and substitute my suppliers could be a huge risk to the business in the long term, especially when that supplier starts to become more powerful, particularly when that supplier was potentially a smaller company when we started with them, and they've now started growing and they've started scaling, and your business starts becoming less important to them. So how do we start building that reliance on a supplier, and how to start moving away from it? And unfortunately, the only way we can really do that is to start looking at something like a tendering process. Now, again, we mentioned processes and policy documents. We mentioned the fact that for corporates, that is what they focus on. That's what their bread and butter is. And it sounds very bureaucratic and it sounds very intimidating for most small businesses, but a tendering process can also be very simple, as long as we make sure we understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. So a tendering process just allows me to identify and to build a portfolio of potential suppliers I can use. Now, in the current state we're in, with people clamoring for more business, we can start dictating as a business for what our requirements are. So if you guys think of any examples you may have had with your suppliers now, most of you probably were in a position where you either had to structure deals or negotiate repayments for things that were coming through because you didn't have funds, or because funds dried up, or you know of companies who had to restructure or owed their suppliers money but weren't able to pay them. Now, many of those suppliers will either not force you onto a cash and delivery sort of payment term, and will not negotiate anything further than that at the moment. So the question will be if that's currently a limitation to your business, can I find another supplier after I obviously reimburse and pay off the debt I have? Can I find a supplier who's willing to work with me? And what are the criteria be for that supplier to work with me on? So if you think about, Helen asked the question about finding new employees and new contractors, the same will apply here. What is the purpose of that supplier? What do they bring to my business? And what is the expectation on my side of how I want to support or how I want to work with that supplier? So are there particular service levels I need to consider? Is there a pricing issue? Can I start negotiating pricing? Because if that supplier is selling a commodity, can I find the commodity elsewhere? All right. Can I implement a payment term discussion or a payment term that suits my business? So while we may not want to be a corporate with the huge long tendering processes, we can start diluting that process a little bit and just putting down the basics. Please advise me, Mr. Supplier, what you're going to be doing for me. What are the offers or what are the services or the products you can supply to me? What is your pricing specification? If I order X amount or if I do X amount with you, can we talk about a payment term that is longer than 30 days? Or can you give me a reduction in fees to make it more worth my while? And I can start, so I wouldn't say playing suppliers off one another, but I can have an evaluation of multiple suppliers then and pick the one that best suits my business. And then on top of that, if that supplier does fold or if that supplier does become a bit difficult, I then have a portfolio of suppliers I can go to and say, okay, can we do business now as well? And can I relook at how my supplier network's working? So a bit of a tricky one of the suppliers, because I know that a lot of us have very key suppliers or potentially suppliers who we don't know personally. So tools of the trade, I mean, Zoom as an example, there's no ways OptiGrowth knows the owners of Zoom. But as an exercise, we have gone through the effort of identifying multiple webinar services and decided on which ones best suit our needs right now. And if Zoom decides to up their fees, or if Zoom decides not to add functionality, or they change the functionality, we have a database of webinar services we can then approach or look into and decide how to use that for the best fit of my business. And I think that's what we need to start doing with our suppliers. Even though there aren't maybe physical people we can talk to, we need to start looking at building a portfolio of multiple suppliers I can quickly substitute when and if I need to. All right. I know we're running out of time, guys. There's about 5 minutes left. So I should finish off on the final thoughts, and then I'll open up for questions or comments if you guys want to have a chat. So final thoughts. Building a resilient business takes time. It's not an easy process, right? Like we mentioned, if you want to start building a resilient business now for the COVID pandemic, it's more than likely or definitely is too late. We have to make sure that we spend the time thinking about what could happen and how do I prevent that could happen status. How do I take my business and avoid the macro factors affecting the things that I can't control? And what can I do within the 3 elements of resilience, particularly for my business, of employees, of suppliers, and of my customers? How can I start building that now to make myself a little bit more resilient? And spend the time actually putting those processes in place. The second thing is taking control of what we can. So looking at my employees, my customers, and my suppliers, and start spreading the portfolio a little bit. Start looking at a wider array of options. Again, Helen mentions, short time of my employees, or do I get contractors in? If I can outsource that requirement to somebody who is an agency and can provide me with staff, then why not consider that option, right? So how do I take the things I can control, and how do I start moving to a point of managing the risk and not being reliant on a particular customer, a particular employee, or a particular supplier? And the last thing is, the only constant is change. So we are all scared of change. We don't like change. And more often than not, the people within our organization or the stakeholders of our organizations hate it even more than we do, because they see change as a threat to the environment. They see change as something they've got to work hard at now. The best thing about change, though, is it should move us to a new state. And that new state should always be a better state, and a state that can make us more money and more profitable, but also improve the values or the environment we're working in, which includes things like our employees as well. So how do I start making sure that change is less stressful and doesn't affect me personally? And the only way to do that is to, again, remove that reliance of those 3 factors: your employees, your customers, and your suppliers. So when something happens or a change is needed, I can make that change relatively easy because it won't be detrimental to my business. All right. I hope that you guys found it interesting. It's now 4 minutes to 11 o'clock. If there are any questions or comments, you're more than welcome to ask. Otherwise, thank you for your time and spending your morning with us.